Hello and welcome to the Conscious Finance Podcast. I'm Leo Hewett, founder of Core3 Recruitment and your host for today. So the purpose of this podcast is to inspire change, to explore ways in which finance leaders can impact business decision-making for the greater good. Often, finance departments can be tarred with a brush of only caring about top line and bottom line profit. So we're here to challenge that stereotype and hopefully prove otherwise. Welcome to the first episode of the Conscious Finance Podcast. I'm Leo Hewett, founder of Core3 and your host for today. So to introduce our first guest, I'm here with Matt Johnson, who is the VP of Finance for Kaluza, which is a B Corp sustainable energy technology business in Bristol. They are one of the many spin-off organisations that have come out of OVO Energy. So Matt is a graduate of Bristol University. He achieved his ACA qualification at PwC, then climbed the ladder at OVO and got up to Deputy CFO before making the move over to Kaluza, I believe just over a year ago, was it, Matt?
Yeah, that's right. It's been almost exactly a year now, actually.
Oh, good stuff. So, I mean, we've known each other a long time. I remember helping you recruit into your team over at OVO many years ago. But I'm interested to find out about your early years and sort of how they molded and shaped you into the person you are today.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, and it's great to be on the podcast. So thanks very much for the invite, Leo. So I was born in South Africa. I was born in Johannesburg and spent the first 7 years of my life there. Was in Joburg for 5 years or so, and in Cape Town for a couple of years before emigrating to the UK. My background and my upbringing in South Africa was really interesting. My parents, especially my dad, was really involved in the anti-Apartheid movement, and so I guess from an early age had quite a strong kind of values-driven approach to the way that we were brought up and sort of life in general. So really interesting to see the incredible change that clearly South Africa's been through, and the incredible man that is Nelson Mandela, that's really helped to drive that and stabilize the country. And it's a fantastic place. It's a wonderful place, and it's a place that we as a family try to get back to every sort of couple of years or so. Bit more challenging nowadays with travel and the impact that has, but it's a place that we still absolutely love and try to get back to. So moved over to England. Amazing. When I was just about 7 years old, and then through years of schooling, was very fortunate enough to get a couple of scholarships to two schools that I was at. So mainly was a music scholarship. So I played the flute and the saxophone and the guitar and the piano.
Did not know that.
Yeah,
love that.
And then had an academic scholarship and did loads of sport as well. So used to really enjoy just running around the school from 7 a.m. until 9 o'clock at night, just doing all sorts of things. I really love variety, and I really like the energy of being around other people and the energy of just doing stuff. And so I think that's really probably set the tone for my career. I really enjoy working in businesses that are really energetic, fast-paced, ambitious, purpose-led, mission-driven, and probably my early years really formed that. So after school, I ended up at Bristol Uni, where ended up meeting my what is now my future wife, Catherine, and we've now got two daughters. And we ended up moving away from Bristol actually after university. I did economics and economic history there. Moved to Plymouth, moved to Australia, moved to Chippenham for a little while, and ended back in Bristol. So Bristol's sort of very close to both of our hearts. It's clearly where we met, but we spent a lot of our sort of formative years there in our 20s at the early stage of our careers.
All the time I've known you, I've just learned so much in about 2 minutes.
Great.
That's amazing. So yeah, I didn't know that about your dad and the apartheid and being quite a big inspiration to you from that perspective. I mean, what values do you think that has instilled in you?
I mean, I think a whole load of things. Making sure that you stand up for what you believe in, valuing diversity, making sure that you are really purpose led in what you're doing. I think one of the most interesting things that I heard from my dad when he was going through the process is clearly as a white South African, you had the ability to just ignore everything that was going on around you. You had the ability to support the nationalist government and support the apartheid, or you had the ability to fight against it and do something about it. And I think probably more than anything, it was probably that latter piece of standing up and not only doing what's right, but really doing what you believe in and standing up for what you believe in. So yeah, I think that's definitely been formative.
Amazing. And I remember when we last spoke, we were talking about charity and community work and things like that. So what are you involved in at the moment outside of your professional life?
So I'm a school governor at a school at Evergreen Primary Academy, which is a really fantastic up and coming academy school. It has been part of the Cabot Learning Foundation for the last sort of 4 or 5 years or so, and really progressed from where it was. It is based in Easton, incredibly diverse school. And it's had an incredible head teacher actually over the last few years, who's done a fantastic job in really driving it forward. So I've been lucky enough to be part of, or a small part of, that journey over the past couple of years. Outside of that, actually, it's really my wife that drives an awful lot of what we do outside of work. We've sort of
Great.
done everything from supporting family charities. We did a 100 hours of litter picking during the pandemic, during May 2021, I think, as a family. So
Wow.
with my two
In one
daughters.
in 1 month.
Yeah, in 1 month, we ended up trying to do a bit of an
Wow.
A to Z of Bristol, trying to go to every single area that we could by name in Bristol. I don't think we managed the whole A to Z, but we covered a fair bit. So hopefully we made a bit of a difference there. But yeah, that's probably
Oh, that's amazing. Getting the kids involved as well must be great to sort of get them bought into your values at the same time.
yeah, absolutely.
So I guess going on to your professional life, why did you choose finance?
Great question. Um, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I probably fell into it. I did economics and economic history at uni. Really enjoyed my degree, and clearly there's a lot of numbers involved in economics, and applied
Mm.
for a load of internships as part of that degree, and ended up was very lucky to get an internship with PwC in Bristol, and ended up getting a grad job there, and starting with them, and that's how I got involved.
Because I always hear you talk passionately about tech as well. So I always feel that you could have ended up being a CTO or CIO of in a different life, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just really curious. I think I really enjoy learning new things all the time. So whether it's tech, or whether it's at the moment we are going through a bit of a house project, so an awful lot for me to learn about gardening, about insulation, about how the inner workings of a house look and work and are built and put together. I just love learning. I'm a bit of a geek at heart, to be honest. So yeah, really enjoyed doing that.
How do you find the time for all this, Matt? I don't know how. Like a VP of finance at Kaluza, you're a governor of a school, getting into home decor and DIY in your free time. Like how do you fit it all in?
It's a great question. Uh, I think if you enjoy doing what you're doing, you find the time for it. Is probably part of the answer. And I have an incredible support network. My wife's amazing. Kids are amazing. We make sure that we have time for us as a family. We make sure that we have time for us as a couple. Make sure that we have time for us as individuals, and clearly part of that is making sure that we have the time at work, we have the time outside of work to spend with friends, and you just manage. I mean, as a parent, I'm sure that you well know, life is just busy with kids, and so you have to
Crazy,
make time.
crazy. Yeah. I think I need some tips from you on time management. I think maybe another time I'll pick your pick your brain on that. Um, so getting into I guess the working world then, why is it important for you to work for a purpose-led business?
Um, I think we've kind of talked about early years, and I think
Yeah.
probably my background, but for me, I uh, fundamentally want to, like I think many people do, just leave the world a better place and be part of a change. I think that really is emphasized when you have kids, and you do think about the world that they're going to live in when they grow up, and we are in such a fast changing world at the moment. There's so much going on that I think now more than ever, we probably think as parents how we are going to impact their future more than perhaps our parents did, and not to put down our parents, but I think just because of the pace of change that's happening in the world at the moment, there's more to think about, I think, for us as adults and as parents.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us about Kaluza then. What do they do?
So we are a software as a service business. We do two things. So first and foremost, we do energy billing. So that's literally helping an energy supplier to bill their customers. So we do not only their core billing engine, which is the thing that eventually produces the bill that you will see as a customer. It also drives the app and the experience that you have as a customer. We have an agent platform that is the interface for an energy supplier's customer service agents to interact with the data that's held within the system, and to be able to use that to talk to customers and to solve problems. It's built on top of effectively a big technology stack. So on a Kafka messaging layer, it's a similar sort of technology that Netflix or Airbnb or LinkedIn uses, and the goal is really to try and make it as real time as possible. So sort of simple user case examples that helps our customers or energy suppliers or our clients, energy suppliers, reduce their costs. So things like making sure that an agent has the ability to see in real time exactly what a customer's balance is, rather than traditionally the way the energy businesses have been set up is more like traditional banking. So banking 30 years ago, you would get your statement in the post at the end of the month. You'd see what balance you had. You could look through all of your transactions. And at that point, if you had a question, you go to the bank and you'd get in touch with them. And that's really the way that energy has worked for many, many, many years. But now, so I think that's changing anyway with clearly the dawn of technology and apps and all that sort of stuff. But what our platform can do is it can literally give you a real-time balance as of today as to how much you are in credit or how much you're in debt with your energy supplier. And I think particularly with everything going on at the moment, that's incredibly important for consumers to understand. So that's the sort of energy billing side of things. So the second part of the platform that we have is it's called our Flex platform, and what that does is it effectively intelligently controls devices within your home. So the big challenge that we have as a country is that the grid is built to deal with the peak or the maximum amount of demand that we have. And when everyone turns on in the morning and everyone turns on in the evening, that's when the grid is at its most overloaded. And so we need to have enough generation, enough supply to be able to serve that demand. And the network and all the wires that you see around the country need to be able to deal with that demand. Now, the challenge that we have is that we can't easily, or certainly in the past, we haven't been able to easily store that energy. So we haven't been able to reduce those peaks very effectively. We've just had to build a grid where the supply equals the demand. Clearly, battery technology and storage is moving on very, very quickly, and you now see these enormous battery storage units. I think Tesla have fairly recently built a whole lot of storage in Australia, for example, that can really support the grid. But where we think we can play a huge part in this is domestic devices. So whether that's an electric vehicle that's sitting on your drive, or whether it's the old electric car battery that's on your wall, which is where all your solar power gets imported into, or whether it's your air source heat pump and controlling that, or the thermostat within your home. What our platform is able to do is control those devices such that it imports energy from the grid when renewables are at their most abundant. So generally when the wind is blowing in the middle of the night, or there's lots of sun in the middle of the day, and stores that energy in these devices. and then exports it out of the devices and then into your home when traditionally the grid has been at its peak. So that way, if we can reduce the two peaks that we have and we don't have this strain on the grid, not only do energy prices come down because we don't have as much generation and we don't have as much demand management the national grid has to do, or supply management the national grid has to do, but also it clearly allows us as a country to have more renewable energy, because the biggest challenge that you have with renewables is they are what you call intermittent. So we don't know when the wind's going to blow, when the sun's going to shine. If we have the ability to at least store and move around the time periods where energy is generated and when energy is used, then we can use more and more renewables going forward. So not only is the platform enabling more renewables, but it's also enabling not only customers to reduce their costs, because they should pay less for energy if they're using energy at more off-peak times than peak times, but also for businesses or for the energy suppliers themselves to pay more for procuring that energy and bring the whole cost of the system down. So clearly, this is an incredibly emotive subject at the moment. There's record power prices, and so if we can get more devices not only as a country but across Europe and across the globe to be able to be controlled by these sort of platforms, then we really can create not only security of energy supply within certain countries, but also lower prices, which is clearly really important for everyone at the moment.
How far off are we, do you think, in this sort of technology being accessible to everyone?
So the technology is there. There's been lots and lots of businesses that have been stood up that are able to do this. The challenge that we have is the devices. We don't have enough electric vehicles on the road, and so we don't have enough storage capacity within batteries there. We don't have enough solar panels on the roof and car batteries that are sitting on the wall to store that energy that's being produced on people's roofs. And clearly, as just heat more generally is being electrified, and less people are going to in the future have gas boilers and are going to have air source heat pumps or ground source heat pumps, then there's more of an ability for us to really influence the amount of energy that can be used. So the big answer is really devices and the infrastructure that sits around that. If we can have more charge points that makes cars more attractive for consumers, and actually fundamentally reduce the price point of being able to buy an electric car, which is probably the biggest blocker at the moment, then we can get there. There's all sorts of targets at the moment to get millions and millions of electric vehicles on the road by 2030. But as we head into a cost of living crisis, and clearly people are not, the first thought of people's minds is certainly not going to be buying an electric car. I think that transition is now probably harder than it's ever been. So there's lots that we can do, but clearly at the moment, one of the biggest blockers is price.
Yeah, I mean, with electric vehicles, it's not just ordering one, it's then actually getting your hands on one by the time waiting for it to arrive. I think I ordered mine in December, and my arrival date is November of this year, and it keeps getting pushed back. So there's such a shortage, isn't there, at the moment with microchips, and I guess the COVID pandemic has slowed production lines in Asia and things like that are really slowing things down, aren't they? I guess beyond those initial hurdles that you talked about, what do you think are I should probably, I guess, position that better. I mean, beyond the things that you talked about there with the initial hurdles, what do you think the future holds for the energy market?
Wow, I mean, that's a really big question. It's really complicated, I think, when you talk about the energy market, because you're then talking about the whole supply chain from generation to networks down to consumers. I think fundamentally we all know at a very basic level, fossil fuels are finite. We all know that human activity leads to global warming, and we all know that we need to do something about that. The challenge that we have at the moment is clearly with the war in Ukraine and Russia's intervention. Security of supply is something that Europe needs to solve in the short term. Now, there's a number of different ways in which you can do that, but that's a huge challenge that we need to meet short term. Second of all, we need to make sure, as I said, that we that we have an affordable proposition for customers to be able to engage in that energy transition. At the moment, electric vehicles are just too expensive. Even with government subsidies for things like air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps, at the moment they're just way more expensive than being able to buy a gas boiler. So I think government intervention is definitely a key part of this in order to really drive affordability. Innovation is a huge part. I think clearly, as you heard, technology is playing a big part, but I think as things like battery technology improves over time, then it'll be much more attractive for consumers to buy electric vehicles and also hopefully cheaper to produce them as well. And there are all sorts of challenges that go well beyond that. Clearly, as a globe, we still have a load of nations that are still trying to develop. We've got India, China, Brazil, all the BRIC nations that are, and clearly South Africa, which is close to my heart, that is trying to develop economically and has all sorts of challenges with unemployment and corruption and inequality that needs to be solved, and actually making sure that there is enough energy supply is a really big part of that. And clearly, as the UK went through an industrial revolution, there was an awful lot of coal that was burned and an awful lot of emissions that got the UK and a lot of many other developed countries to the position that they're in. And so there's this really fine balance that we need to get right now between making sure that those developing nations have the ability to develop, and we don't increase the amount of inequality that we have within the world, but also making sure that we have the ability to support those nations in being part of the energy transition. I think you can see that across the piece starting to happen already. But I think there's a huge challenge ahead as we likely short term head into a global recession.
Yeah. I just hope we can move fast enough, because you look around what's happening right now with climate change, it just seems to be catching up with us faster and faster, which is just quite scary, really.
Yeah.
So you mentioned energy prices. I think as somebody who's been in the sector for so long, I'd be really interested. I'm sure the audience would like to hear your opinion on when this will come to a close, because things are getting harder and harder for people, aren't they?
Yeah, and I wish I had the answer. I think nobody has the answer. Nobody knows. If you look at simply the forward curve for energy, it's predicted that prices will clearly go down over time. But when that's going to be, how that's going to be, is a really difficult question to answer. At least on the back of the policies that have been recently announced, there's a cap on energy in this country until the next election. So at least there's some support for the next couple of years. But I mean, let's see what happens. I think there's a number of different factors at the moment that's driving the price. So I really hope for everybody's sake that the price reduces as quickly as possible.
Guesstimation?
I mean, you can't put a timeline on it. I mean, I would push the question back, guesstimation as to how long Putin is going to continue his war in Ukraine. Guesstimation as to how quickly individual nations are going to be able to get security of supply. Guesstimation on how quickly we're going to be able to get electric vehicles on the road. I mean, there's too many unanswered questions. So it's a tricky one.
Yeah, no, you can see that now. So moving on to finance and the role of finance within a business. What is your vision for the future of finance and the role of a CFO?
Great question. I think finance is changing dramatically. I mean, traditionally, I think it's been the department that's been there to report the numbers and be in charge of internal control generally, or making sure that there's an internal control environment, and almost being just a very much of a back office environment. I think that's definitely changing over time. There is, I think, an awful lot of value that actually all departments within a business can add. I mean, again, traditionally legal has been very much in that camp as well, but more and more so now. I think there is opportunity for all parts of business to really add a huge amount of value to that business going forward. So, on the finance side of things, For me, that the role of the chief financial officer, I think, is really changing to be the role of the chief value officer. Uh,
Love that.
well, I think they may have stole that from BCG, but I think it's moved in the direction of really trying to not only be the scorecard of the business, as I think finance has traditionally been, but also to really derive insight as to how the business is performing, analyze how the business is performing, and then drive change going forward, and be more focused on the drivers of what will eventually be the outputs, which are the financials, so the upstream metrics, the input metrics, and partnering the business to be able to really drive that forward. Clearly, alongside all of the other traditional stuff that finance does do, I mean, it needs to be there that as a department to make sure that the business knows how it is performing, and it's recording things in an accurate way and in a complete way, and all that good stuff. Make sure that it's on top of risk, make sure that it's on top of controls. But more and more so, I think it's involved in a strategic thinking in the business more so than it's ever been in the past. So that I think it's always been a department where you've been able to have a look at a full 360 view of a business, because you are just by nature involved in a lot of elements of the business. But I'd say traditionally it's been less strategic. I think more and more so now it's becoming more strategic, not only at a senior leadership level, but throughout the whole department.
Hmm. So, in your opinion, how do you think a finance leader can drive meaningful positive change from a ESG perspective?
I think in a number of different ways. So I think ESG is incredibly far-reaching, and I think it is not only about a business's impact on the environment and the business's impact on social issues, but it's also about making sure that the business is held to account in hitting those targets. So, as I said before, the finance team fundamentally is there as the scorecard of the business, and so I think accountability is a really key part of what the finance team is or should be doing as part of a business. But also, I think it's incredibly important that finance partners and has strong relationships with other elements of the business that are trying to drive change under the overall banner of ESG. So, whether that's partnering really strongly with a people team and making sure that the policies that businesses have and actually the outcomes of those policies that we have within the finance team drives a better business. So, as I said at the beginning, really valuing diversity and how that can make you a better business is a really important part of that. Really valuing equality and inclusivity as well is incredibly important and drives a huge amount of value within the business if you implement things in the right way. And clearly from an environmental perspective, and I think more and more so going forward, there is a much stronger connection between making your business a better business and also positively impacting the environment. So, as a software business, for example, we have a commitment at the moment called green development in order to try and reduce the amount of carbon emissions that we have as a business. And some simple examples of where we've had some really great wins recently in the way that the amount of usage that we have of our hosting platforms like AWS and GCP has not only reduced the amount of carbon emissions that we have as a business, but it's also fundamentally reduced the costs, which is great. That's to make a more efficient business as well as making a more sustainable business is something that I think everybody wants to do. So yeah, finance team is a really cool part of that.
Yeah, I think that there's so much in that where business leaders often don't realize the benefit of having that ESG focus. And you've mentioned one benefit there of cost saving potentially, but equally customers now are more and more demanding responsible businesses when they choose who they work with, and same with other businesses wanting to work with other like-minded businesses. So it's not just there to be socially responsible. It can also have huge commercial value to attract customers, to attract business, to really grow revenues at the same
Yeah,
time.
absolutely. So I think in the past that's always been two concepts that haven't been well linked, but more and more so now. I think it's perfectly possible to be able to do both. I mean, clearly, as a business, you need to be able to be financially sustainable, and so at the end of the day, you need to, if not make a profit in the short term, and clearly for startups, that's just not what's expected. Certainly, have the discipline to stay within a funding perimeter and have an discipline around the capital that you have to be able to then grow. But if you approach things from a really strong set of values, a mission and purpose led business can really succeed just as quickly as any other business. And I think, as you say, consumer appetite to ensure that businesses are holding themselves and others to account to make sure that they are making more of a positive change on the world is becoming more prevalent, which is great.
You talked about accountability as well, and I've read up quite a lot about the concept of the triple
Yeah.
bottom line, where it's not just profit, but also people and planet. Have you seen any good examples, or have you implemented any good ways of really sort of tracking and monitoring impact as part of the business model? And can finance be a part of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's more reporting around this stuff than there's ever been in the past, and so yes, of course, finance plays a part in reporting and setting the direction of travel. Clearly, with leadership in business to set the targets and report against those targets as to how businesses are doing. But um, there's also a really strong connection between the drivers of the business, or the inputs of the business, and how that impacts the financials at the end. And you talk about people, for example. You have all sorts of traditional business models that people have pulled together in the past. So things like the people service profit model, where people are at the heart of that. And certainly for a business like ours, our main asset are our people. And so if we can try and get the best out of our people in the way that we behave as a business, in the way that we set ourselves up to be a great place to work, and ultimately the mission and the purpose that we have as a business, that's only going to be good for the bottom line. So that's just one example when we talk about people, but I think we mentioned before already the impact that you can have in the way that you on the environment, in the way that you set up targets. So this green development concept that we've got within Kaluza at the moment is clearly not only impacting in a positive way the amount of costs that we have as a business to make us more efficient, but also fundamentally the amount of carbon emissions that we have. So I think there's more connection now than there's ever been. There's more reporting now than there's ever been, and therefore, as a result, I think there's naturally just going to be more accountability for everybody.
Great, love that. So I'd be interested to hear your opinion of how an ESG strategy can really be effective, because we see a lot of businesses with a ESG agenda, or they've got a declaration on their website, or they've appointed a head of sustainability over here that's nothing to do with the business, and often it can be a siloed department that's separate to the strategy of the business. So what's your opinion on that?
I think more and more so, it's becoming part of, if not the business strategy, particularly for those businesses that are more purpose driven. As a business, we have a document called Mission Transition that does exactly that. It's effectively our sustainability and business plan together as one. And I think you're seeing that more and more so in the market. And fundamentally, all of this does come down to transparency and holding yourself to account. Setting yourselves targets for what you can do as a business, reporting on those targets, and making sure that if you're not heading in the right direction, then you're course correcting. And this stuff is hard. It's not easy to be able to push a business in a different direction, particularly when you've got the constraint of capital or costs. So I think
it's time. It's
yeah.
time as well. We've just gone through the B Corp process here, and the impact reporting is a massive part of it. And the time and resource you've got to allocate to it is huge, and that's just in a business of our size. In a business the size of Kaluza or Ovo is astronomical. So it's a huge
Yeah,
commitment,
but I
isn't
think if
it?
these two things can be connected, it makes it much easier because it doesn't have to be a silo. I've mentioned it a few times now, but the amount of money that we spend on AWS is directly correlated to then the amount of emissions that we have as a business. And so there are
Hmm.
ways in which you can do this even at a really top line level. Back of an envelope calculations that say this amount of usage that you have equals this amount of carbon emissions saved, and at least directionally that is pushing the business in the right way. This stuff is really difficult to measure accurately. We clearly have science-based targets now that can really help, but it's not a perfect science. You can't exactly measure this down to the decimal place. The important thing is directionally people are moving in the right way. So I don't think it needs to necessarily be the same sort of reporting frameworks that you have for, say, financials, where you do need to get things right to the penny for the most part. But you can connect the two, I think, relatively simply in order to push the business in the right direction, both from a financial perspective, but also clearly from an ESG perspective.
Yeah, and it looks like there's some really good tech tools coming out at the moment that can help with things like carbon accounting and measuring your footprint of your
Yeah,
supply chain and things like that. I know that Spherics is one example. They're a Bristol business, I believe, and Ecology also Bristol are coming out with a platform soon to help measure that. But like you say, it's not a perfect science, and especially when it comes to
yes,
scope
exactly.
three emissions and
Yeah.
things like that, that's just sort of can become quite finger in
Yeah,
the air,
indeed. I mean,
can't it?
even scope two can be really challenging. So I think there's an awful lot that you can do, and I think as long as you are like anything in life, if you are doing things for the right reasons and you're trying to improve things, and doing your best to hold yourself to account with the information that you've got, then I think fundamentally you're going to end up in a better position. So I don't think it necessarily has to be a science to make a positive change.
No, I think it's just making the effort to actually do
Yeah,
something about it,
indeed.
isn't it? So this might be a difficult question, but what would you say is the one thing that you've done in your finance career that's had the biggest impact from a social environmental perspective?
Oh, wow, that is a great question. I find that really difficult to answer as an individual. I don't think it'd be right to answer
Okay.
it as an individual necessarily either. Um,
I guess it's bigger than that. It's the team.
it's almost bigger than that. I think fundamentally it's about um, how the leadership in a business approaches things. And it's the culture and the
Mm,
tone and set of values that you have around it. It's similar to the way that businesses approach risk. You know, if you embed risk as part of the processes that you have, it's much easier to manage. Whereas if it's this siloed thing that sits on the side, then it becomes a burden and it becomes an admin task, and it doesn't get done and it doesn't add any value. I think it's kind of,
yeah.
and clearly that's governance and part of holding uh, each other to account within a business. I think it's similar from just generally an ESG perspective. I think the biggest impact that you can have is clearly the mission and the purpose that you have as a business in the first instance, and the set of values that surrounds that. Um, and
Mhm.
I'm really lucky to sit on a leadership team that takes this stuff seriously, and really wants to drive positive change. I think the culture that you set up then within the finance team to really help drive that change is really important as well. And making sure that you've got a team that have the same set of purpose led values as well as an awful lot of hard work, because this, as I said before, this stuff is hard. Um, is
Mm.
is a really important part of managing it. I think the challenge with answering a question like this is that you can there are an awful lot of things that I think everybody does on a day to day basis that are small things, and the small things really count. it's really, really important to do those small things. Um, it's important to make sure that your recruitment processes are set up in a way that allows you to be as open-minded, inclusive, is really ensuring that the process is fair and diverse. But that should just be, you know, a hygiene standard for a business. But it's really important, and I think making
Hmm.
sure that that's set up within any sort of department, if they want to drive positive change, is a huge part of how you want to set up the strategy for your department and how you want to set up the strategy for your business. Um, I mean, I say that's a small
Mm.
thing. I guess it is a bigger thing, but um, there are a number of different things that I don't know. From my perspective, should be hygiene factors, and maybe the purpose of the question is to try and delve into uh, what those hygiene factors are and where you can really improve them. I'm
Would you say perhaps that the one thing that's had the biggest impact is having that growth mindset around the marginal gains? And when you make those small improvements to all the small things and then put them back together, the combined effect is much greater.
Absolutely, but again, that comes down to the culture that you set in the first instance. If you give people the opportunity and the
Mm.
autonomy to be able to crack on with this stuff in the right way and the tools to be able to do this effectively, then it should accelerate the change. Of course, it's about all the small things that we all do on a day to day basis, but those small things become exponentially greater if you can set the tone at the top in the right way. Which is why I think the question's not necessarily about me as an individual, or it's not necessarily about everybody as an individual. Whilst of course we all play a part in that, and it's really important that everyone continues to make incremental change in everything that they do within a business. But it's even more important, I think, in my opinion, to make sure that that tone is set from the top, that culture is created, and those set of values are there at the top in order to really accelerate the change.
Hmm. That's a great answer. I think what I'd be interested in hearing your opinion of would be how you feel finance leaders or even finance individuals can influence their business to make meaningful change when perhaps the appetite isn't there. Because it's easier in a purpose-led, values-driven, mission-focused organization, I guess, because like you say, top down, it's there. But I think where the challenge really lies is if you haven't got that appetite coming from the top, how can finance leaders influence positive change and really sort of get their stakeholders to wake up to the importance of this?
Again, that's a really difficult question. I think there are clearly things that financiers do on a day-to-day basis in terms of the amount of analysis that they do of numbers, insight that you can create from those numbers that should help to drive business cases around this stuff. But it's not just the finance team that makes this change. A finance team is a part of that change. And I guess from my perspective, the most important role, and I think this is where the finance teams more generally are changing or evolving over time, is to have really strong partnership with other experts in the business in order to drive that change. You know, if you think about the way in which a business needs to drive its DE and I strategy, it's incredibly important that as a finance leader, if you want to be part of that change, you're partnering really strongly with your people team or your HR team or whatever you call it in your business in order to help to drive that change. You know, traditionally, this is making a huge generalization, but generally finance is a little bit better at the numbers, and the people team are generally closer to the coalface of how you really improve strategy around managing people and getting the most out of people and having a really diverse workforce and diverse school of thought, not school of thought, diversity of thought within a business uh,
Mm-hmm.
to make your business more valuable. It's again, it's a really difficult question to answer because I don't think it's up to to finance leaders themselves. It's up to finance leaders partnering with other parts of the business to really drive the change. But I think finance can clearly use their role as part of that in order to help make some of this stuff a little bit more transparent. If we carry on the theme of DE and I, we've got a lot more reporting now, and making sure that is visible to all stakeholders that finance deal with on a day-to-day basis. A lot of the time, potentially that reporting is coming from the people team or the HR team, but maybe there's a way in which the finance team can impact or analyze the change that that data shows makes a positive difference to the business, by the benchmarking against other businesses, or actually seeing what's changed within your business. And there's all sorts of stuff that goes on in this arena. The 4-day working week is a classic one at the moment, where businesses are being more flexible and making sure that the finance team can be part of understanding how that change has been positive as a business is important.
So I was speaking to just on that. I was speaking to a sustainability consultant not long ago, and he made me think differently about a finance department and actually how CFOs and FDs can influence change when it comes to their businesses. And I think ultimately they are the budget holder, the people who own the keys to the budget, and they how the business spends money, they can have an influence on that. And he gave a really good example. They worked with a big finance ERP provider. I won't name which one, but they help them with their sustainability strategy in terms of finding a way to hardwire social impact into their business model. And often I think business leaders can think, okay, this is going to cost us loads of money. We need to start giving money away to charity or planting trees or whatever it might be. But this sort of flipped that on its head and actually looked at the existing budgets that are there within an organization and thought differently about them. So this example was their sales budget. One of their promotions that they gave, if somebody bought their finance system, was then to offer free training on top once they've got that system in place, to help people on board. And that was a huge cost, big overhead in terms of time, labor to train up their customers on how to use it, which previously they used to charge extra for. But it was a bolt on to try and increase sales. So what they decided to do with the help of this consultant was, why don't we just use that budget, which is in the hundreds of thousands of pounds, and put it into a social giving offering to our customers, so that they can choose when they buy our system where that money goes, a charity of their choosing, which then helps them with their ESG agenda and doesn't cost us any more money. So they went for it, and actually the result was 20% year on year increase in sales, and their impact from an ESG perspective obviously went through the roof, because it was hardwired into every single sale that they did. And that wasn't necessarily a business that was purpose led or values driven. So I think there is something to be said about the influence that a finance leader can have in terms of holding the keys to that budget. Obviously, the other budget holders will have to give the nod for that, but they can surely influence that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it goes without saying that budgets are part of the picture, but I think more than that, it's probably investment cases. And this is where I passionately believe it's not just about the pound value figure at the end of the day. And I think budgets have traditionally been managed that way. To me, it's far more about the upstream drivers that impact that ultimate pound value, and that can be quite complicated. So take, for example, the amount of money that you spend as a business around recruitment costs. The more attrition that you have in a business, then the more recruitment that you're going to have to do. And so trying to reduce the amount of employee attrition that you have is a really, really difficult problem to solve. And there's a number of different ways in which you can do that, of which some of that is actually trying to drive change in the way that the business is set up to have more of an ESG agenda, for example. And so you can put forward a really strong business case as a finance business partner, for example, to show that actually investing incrementally more money in something can actually drive to a bigger saving over here. So I don't think it's necessarily about budgets all of the time, whilst obviously that plays a part. And I think your example is a really, really good example of that. Somebody has made a decision to repurpose budget and invest it slightly differently in a way that fundamentally, and I think in that example, is driving better marketability of a product, and it's then ultimately driving the top line, because it's speaking to the consumers as to what those consumers are looking for in a product and looking for in a business. And I think ESG is, in many respects, the marketing of that is quite important for businesses. It's important to attract talent. It's important to attract customers. It's important to retain talent. It's important to retain customers. But for me, when it comes to financials, it's not necessarily about cost control, although clearly there's a big part of the finance team responsibility for that. It's also sometimes about spending money in order to drive change. So business cases to me or forming business cases as a finance team are a really, really critical part of that. So yes, you're absolutely right. I guess I would frame it in a slightly different way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, ultimately, I'm not a CFO or a finance director, so I'll take your word on that. It did remind me actually when you said about recruitment, another example that this consultant gave me relating to recruitment actually, which I loved. Again, repurposing a budget was this steelworks in the US, huge steelworks. They were churning staff, massive turnover problems, couldn't attract talent because the millennials and the Gen Z want to work for sexy tech startups and they don't want to work for a steelworks. And they were spending millions on recruitment fees, year in, year out to try and attract talent, but it just wasn't getting anywhere. And what they did was take a big chunk of that recruitment budget and they repurposed it into employee benefits, where the employees could put 10% of their earnings every year into social and environmental impact of their choosing again. So it's a similar concept, but what they found again, their candidate attraction rate went through the roof because suddenly they got such a purpose behind it, and then from a retention perspective, the employees could actually feel every single year what impact they were having, and they had the choice of which charity they were going to support. So I thought there's some really clever examples in there of where it's not spending any more, but it's changing not just the impact of a business, but the growth and talent attraction rate and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we said before, I think it's a really good example where the two things go hand in hand. You've got both of your examples where a business has either increased their top line or had no impact on their bottom line because of a repurposing of funds in a way that is at the end of the day making the business a better business in the way that it operates. So the two things definitely go hand in hand, more and more so nowadays. And I, just to reiterate, I think the way that finance teams can really impact that is by making sure that everybody has, or all the decision makers in those processes have the right information and the right business case to be able to make these decisions. Because quite often, actually, these decisions are much easier to make than people think. You just have to have the right information in front of you in order to make it a no-brainer decision to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where the whole business partnering side of things comes in, isn't it?
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a critical part.
So just in terms of practical applications, just thinking about our audience, is there anything that you would recommend that a finance department could implement tomorrow that will really make a difference, big or small, when it comes to social, environmental impact?
I think the biggest difference is visibility and transparency of the information in the first instance. I think if the business and stakeholders within the business understand what's going on within the business, understand what needs to change within the business, has the right target set, which comes down to culture and leadership, then you can make an almost immediate impact. And so ensuring that you've got better automation in your systems, you've got better self-serve reporting for stakeholders is all part of that change, which again, you should just be doing as part of the hygiene factors of running a more efficient finance department anyway. But there are, again, as we talked about before, all sorts of other things that finance teams and finance leaders in particular should be doing in all parts of running their teams. From the recruitment part of leadership, actually all the way up to making sure that as a finance department you have your own mission and purpose and strategy and set of objectives that you are holding your own team accountable to. I think that's incredibly important.
I love that.
And something that we've set up within our business. And I think more than anything, it's having an open mind as a leader as to what you can achieve. As I said, some of these decisions become no-brainer decisions once you open your mind to the possibility of what you can do. And I think if it's finance's responsibility to help business or leaders within the business to get to that decision, it's the responsibility of the finance leader to open their mind in order to help to really drive that agenda. So.
Amazing. What a great note to finish on. Love that, Matt. Thank you. And hopefully we've had some really good insight there for our audience for the first episode of the Conscious Finance podcast, and looking forward to doing more. If anybody out there is a finance leader and has an interest in coming on, being a guest and sharing ideas that will influence change, then by all means reach out directly to me. But thank you, Matt, for your time. It's been really, really valuable, and look forward to catching up with you soon.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Leo.